All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a wild story about how a simple sidewalk survey in Taiwan ended up trapping hundreds of people in years of debt. It sparked this massive legal showdown with a beauty giant called Ainia. This is all about their high-pressure sales method and the long, long fight for justice. You know the drill, right? You're just walking down the street, and someone with a clipboard asks for just a minute of your time. Seems totally harmless. But for hundreds of people in Taiwan, this was the very first step into a really carefully designed, high-pressure sales trap set by the beauty company Ainia. So it all started right there on the street. Investigators found that Ainia had this systematic process going across its 150-plus stores, and the way in was almost always one of these casual, public encounters. So you've got Ainia's employees, and they're targeting people in really busy areas, near train stations, in night markets, with these offers that sound totally innocent. They'd promise it's quick, it's free, no pressure to buy anything. But the real goal? Oh, it was to get you off the street and into their store. And that's where the rules and the whole environment changed completely. Okay, so once a potential customer was actually inside, the sales pitch would just escalate into what a lot of people described as this multi-hour ordeal. It was all designed to wear them down until they just gave in and agreed to buy. The Fair Trade Commission's investigation laid bare this incredibly systematic process. They called it the Ainia method. First, they lure you in. Then, and this is clever in a devious way, they get you in a vulnerable position. Often they'd start a facial but leave it half-finished, so you're sitting there with cream on only half your face. That's when a team of salespeople surrounds you and they just start talking for hours. People reported being kept for 3, even 4 hours until they were just too exhausted to argue anymore. The only way out was to sign a contract, often for a shocking amount of money. And here's the final trap. They would pressure you to unseal every single product, sometimes on camera, making it almost impossible to ask for a refund later. This quote here, it's pieced together from tons of consumer court testimonies, and it just perfectly captures what it felt like. This wasn't just a sales pitch, it was a psychological tactic. It was designed to leave people feeling trapped and so desperate that they'd do anything to leave, no matter what it cost. So as you can imagine, this strategy led to a huge number of complaints. We're talking over 750 filed with government agencies in just a few years. A lot of consumers took Ainia to court, but, getting their money back turned out to be incredibly difficult, at least at first. But why? Why was it so hard to win? I mean, these people clearly felt like they were wronged, but they needed a legal argument that would actually stick in court. And, well, the most obvious ones just weren't cutting it. Okay, so the first failed approach was just to claim fraud. But the courts often sided with the company. They pointed out that these were adults signing contracts. And get this, in one crazy case, a man who had spent over 670,000 NT dollars had visited the store 35 times. The court looked at that and said, hey, this doesn't look like coercion. It looks like a customer. Then the second strategy was to use the visit sale law. This law gives you a 7-day cooling off period. It worked for some first-timers, but if you were a repeat customer, the courts basically said, well, if you came back, it's not a surprise anymore. So tons of people were just stuck. For years, it really seemed like Ainia's system was, if not ethical, at least legally solid. But then everything changed when the government decided to launch a massive coordinated investigation. And this was the big turning point. After years of individual complaints just piling up and going nowhere, Taiwan's Fair Trade Commission, or FTC, finally stepped in. And they didn't just look at 1 or 2 cases. No, they investigated the entire Ainia business model, from top to bottom. And what they found was, wow. They hit Ainia with a record-breaking fine of 25 million new Taiwan dollars. At the time, that was the highest penalty ever for this kind of violation under the Fair Trade Act. So why was the fine so huge? Well, the FTC found that this wasn't just a few bad apples. It was a systematic, deceptive strategy planned by the head office and used across the whole chain. They hid key info, pitching free facials when the real massive cost was buried in the products. They used what's called the consumables trap, telling customers, oh, you need to buy more products to keep getting your free service. And they deliberately blocked refunds by making people unseal everything. The FTC's official ruling was just damning. They said Aiinia's entire business model was a deceptive and obviously unfair act that was hurting the whole market.
But here's the thing. That huge fine, it wasn't even the most important part of the story. The FTC's ruling fundamentally changed the whole legal game. It gave consumers the exact weapon they needed to finally fight back and actually win.
So what was this new weapon? It was a totally different way of looking at the contract. Instead of seeing it as a simple product sale, lawyers and judges started to see it for what it really was, a continuing service contract. Just think of it like a gym membership or a prepaid package of classes. You pay up front for something you're going to receive over time. And the key part is, the law gives you special rights to cancel these kinds of contracts and get your money back for whatever you haven't used yet. Armed with the FTC's findings, the courts started to look past the label on the contract. They stopped caring that it said product sale agreement. Instead, they started analyzing the substance of the deal. What was the customer really buying here? And a recent court ruling just says it all. The judge basically said, look, I don't care that you called it a product sale. The so-called free service wasn't just some bonus, it was the main reason people signed up. It was the whole point. So, in substance, it's a service contract. And by reclassifying the deal like that, the court unlocked a whole new set of rights for the consumer. And the change was just night and day. You can see it right here. Before the FTC ruling, winning in court was a long shot. The argument was fraud, which is tough to prove, and courts just focused on the literal text of the contract. After the ruling, the success rate skyrocketed. The winning argument became continuing service, and courts started focusing on the real substance of the deal. It completely turned the tables, and the real-world impact of this was enormous. Take this one case. A consumer had been pressured into spending over 1.3 million NT dollars. That's over 40,000 US dollars. Using this new legal argument, the court ordered Ainia to refund him more than $850,000 for all the products and services he hadn't even used yet. It was a massive victory. So, the whole Ainia saga really forces us to ask this fundamental question, right? When a company's contract is carefully written to protect itself, but its actual business practices are clearly unfair and manipulative, which one should the law follow? The piece of paper or the reality of the situation? This case in Taiwan is a powerful argument that, in the end, substance has to win out over form. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.